let's kick it off. Hey, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We just kicked off this weekly webinar series where we're trying to keep things fun, interesting, teach a skill, either a life skill or a work skill or a combination of both. And hopefully you leave this session today a little more energized and with a few more tools in your arsenal. I'll introduce myself in a second, but first, for those of you who are wondering that this looks like a Zoom meeting, it's not exactly a webinar. I just wanted to address that thing right off the bat with a little piece of interesting trivia. Before I jump into which, if you haven't typed in where you're joining us from, this is your last chance to do that and be recognized on the map. So go ahead, folks, and put that in, because I'm going to move in 3, 2, 1, and all right. Fun fact, 25 years ago, 1998, in a place not far away from where I am. So I'm in a place called Basking Ridge in New Jersey. And there's a place called Watchung, which is roughly a 10-minute drive away from here. And 25 years ago, this gentleman, Eric Cobb, interestingly filed a trademark for the word webinar. And the idea was a web-based conference and conducting business conferences over the web. I mean, no brainer over there. Another fun fact, the trademark was actually invalidated because it was not renewed around 2006 or 2007. And as we know, it's become a generic term now that everybody is using. Since we're all so familiar with Zoom, the assumption is that a webinar is one where people don't have their videos, they don't have their audios. A meeting is not a webinar. There's meetings and there's webinars. We're just going to use the term webinar very, very loosely to describe anything like this on the web, where we're having a conversation with a group of people, where you're presenting something more often than not, and you're having a conversation. Perfect. Just see a few people. Joe, if you can just let the folks in the waiting room in. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Quick introduction. So my name is Lux Narayan. My friends call me Lux, so please call me Lux. I'm the CEO and a co-founder at StreamAlive, and we help make live sessions like this, whether it's online or offline or hybrid, a lot more alive and a lot more interactive. Just want to chat a little bit about why we built StreamAlive in the first place. So I have a passion for speaking. I love to speak. So I've spoken at TED, and I've also, in a moment of weakness, done a 5-minute stint at the Comedy Cellar in New York, which is probably the toughest and most scary speaking assignment I've ever done. So I like speaking, and I also like reading and writing. And for various reasons, personal and professional, I was on a break in the middle of 2020. And at that time, I used my newfound free time to essentially focus on writing a book. And that book is what you see on the screen over there. It's called Name, Place, Animal, Thing. And for those of you who stay on till the end, we're actually giving away one free copy of this. So stay around, and maybe your name is picked out of the automatic winning wheel to get a copy of this. But that aside, I didn't know the first thing about writing a book. Again, keep aside the fact that you might read the book and say, I still don't. I attended a bunch of classes on how to write, edit, and market a book. And these were delivered over 6 different courses that I paid for, and were delivered over about 56 live sessions that happened in the latter half of 2020. I hate to say this, but the bulk of them were what we describe as borinars. And there's a very simple reason why, because people were disconnected. It was difficult, and we'll talk about some of the challenges over there and what typifies a borinar over there. But there were a lot of things that led to the genesis of our thinking around what makes a much better online session. And today's objective is to share a lot of those learnings, and not just share them by way of theory, but actually demonstrate some of them as we go through the session. Heads up, I'm going to need a lot of help from you to make this interesting and interactive. So just like you typed in a little while back as to where you joined us from, keep your fingers on the chat. I'm going to need you to be super active on it. And let's kick it off with this question. I'd love for all of you, in 1 or 2 words, describe what you do. I'm trying to get a better sense of the folks in the room. So if you can just take 1 or 2 words to describe what you do and put it in the chat, just type it in the chat as to what you do. All right. Marketing operator, we've got management, we've got technology, meaningful video production, product. Okay, so you got people who are involved with audiovisual content, with marketing, with technology. Go ahead, folks. Operations. Quite a few folks in the room. Okay, and there's obviously a lot of diversity over here in terms of the kind of roles you all occupy in your day lives. And I'm just curious, and I mean, from 2 perspectives. One is that I'm a very curious person. And second, I want to make sure I address whatever it is you joined us for today. So I have one more question over here in relation to this. Why did you join us today? I'm glad you did, but I'd love to hear why you joined us today. So if you don't mind, just type it in the chat again. Okay, we've got someone who wants to see StreamAlive in action. You will be seeing StreamAlive. The purpose of today's session is not to here is how you use StreamAlive, though I think we should maybe do a session like that. It is to help you make meetings a lot more engaging. It is to learn more about webinars, to improve live sessions. So absolutely, I think we will be addressing a lot of those things. This, by the way, is a feature called Talking Tiles that takes that. We love Tetris. We have a mini Tetris fan club within the office. And this is obviously inspired by that in a lot of ways. You can write more than one answer, by the way. If you have more, please feel free to jump in and put that in. Right? Learn more about webinars, how to make it interesting, make StreamAlive appear professionally. Hopefully, I'll be giving you a demonstration of how exactly to do that. But the whole idea is absolutely this, to make it a lot more interesting and engaging. How to engage the audience. Okay, awesome. Focus on lead qualification. Okay, interesting. Hooked by the Borinars. All right, I'm going to try something a little ad hoc over here. I'm going to just, again, no pressure here. I'm going to pick all of you who answered that question we just asked on why you joined us, because I didn't expect so much of a variety in the answers. So I'm just going to pick one of you who answered that question. And if you're feeling up to it, Heather, the wheel just shows you. If you're up for it, would love for you to unmute and tell us, what you expect to get from this session today. And again, it's entirely up to you.
Yeah, no, I feel comfortable with that. Thank you so much for inviting me on. So Lux, I'm a tech host, which means I help groups like this have an efficient and engaging and hopefully equitable experience online. And I was introduced to StreamAlive a couple of months ago and haven't put it to use, but I'm now have a pretty big gig on a Zoom webinar, and I teach and also present a lot in Zoom meetings, but I wanted to make sure that the webinar was more engaging, and I knew that StreamAlive could help me, just wasn't sure how. So already you've shown a couple of, I guess they're called run of shows, or a couple of features that I didn't even know existed.
Thank you so much for joining us, first of all, and everything you described is exactly why we built StreamAlive. So hopefully some of the things we're doing here help, and if we can help even more, you know how to reach us. Just ping us. We'd be happy to jump on a call and show it to you one-on-one as well. Thank you again.
Great. Head. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. All right. We talked about, a couple of you mentioned it in the comments as well about Borinars and things. I'm actually going to jump right in and dive into the heart of the matter in terms of what qualifies, or what are the archetypes of a typical Borinar, right? These are the 6 things that we've distilled and we believe are things that typify a lot of boring meetings, boring webinars. Heather mentioned webinars and meetings. And in fact, webinars as defined by Zoom are more challenging than meetings, because webinars are one where people's videos are off. They don't even have the option to put it on unless they're called out. Their audio is by default off. It's a lot more of a monologue. So it's structurally geared towards that, unfortunately. And there's all the more effort you need to do to make it interesting, right? So I think the DNA is first assuming things about your audience, assuming that your audience fits a certain archetype, fits a certain profile. You might have, someone talked about lead generation a little earlier. Your marketing efforts might have been geared towards attracting a certain kind of lead, and you make the assumption that everybody who joins your session is exactly that kind of lead. And very often that's not the case, right? There are different people in the room, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and we need to acknowledge that, understand that, and read that. We need to read the room very plainly. And reading a digital room is a little more difficult than reading a physical room, and that's exactly what we need to do, so you don't assume things about the audience. The other thing that is typical in a Borinar is it's a recordable monologue. I want to just unpack that a little bit. It's recordable, and that's why so many people just treat it like a recording. It's almost like something that is there, that's being pre-recorded or has been done time in and time out. It's like a monologue altogether. A Borinar is typified with the fact that people don't ask questions of the audience, or even worse, the next thing, which is ask questions and ignore the answers that people give. Everybody says join us for this interactive webinar, and it's not interactive. It's entirely scripted, except for the Q&A part, which is really the only part of the interaction. And again, I've been yelled at in so many Zoom webinars because I put my question in the chat, and then the presenter or the moderator says, folks, we will not answer any questions that are there in the chat. Please put your questions in the Q&A tab. By the way, side thing, if you guys, if anyone has any questions, just put them in the chat anytime, right? So if you have any questions at this point in time, just go ahead and put it in the chat. We will intermittently be jumping into this feature that we call quick questions, which automatically pulls up questions, right? Okay, so Tina actually has a question for Heather, which we can probably take offline, or if you have time permits, maybe Heather, you can share with us later as to what the webinar is about, how to engage the audience. Audio is not clear, maybe because of the music. Okay, we've stopped the music, so hopefully the audio is clear now. So I'm going to delete this question, Q&A as well. It does not use the Q&A, it only uses the chat. Our thing is that, just like Tim, if I were to have a conversation with you, and let's pretend we met in person, and I ask you a question about your family, and you're about to answer, and I say, hey, Tim, hang on. Any personal kind of stuff, we go and discuss in that room. Our belief is that we shouldn't have to compartmentalize conversations in the digital world, because we don't do that in the physical world. So we run everything off the chat. In fact, we encourage people to disable the Q&A. I'm just going to go back to my slide here. So Q&A, we're going to do Q&A intermittently. Put your questions anytime in the chat, and we'll address it like we just did. I wanted to show you that it's working, and it will, the AI will pick up questions from the chat. If you have a question mark at the end of it, it helps. If you don't, it'll still pick it up with about 90% accuracy. And the last thing is being presumptuous, which is that you decide that your run of show, which is kind of your sequence of slides and questions and interactions, works. That is really the sixth cardinal mistake that people do in delivering boring webinars. The solution, not surprisingly, is the opposite of that. In fact, it's exactly the same words that you see in red, except the don't in the third line. If you move it to the beginning, you're going to get the solution to making an engaging webinar, which is don't assume things about your audience. Deliver an experience that rewards live attendance. And again, thank you everybody for joining this live. There are a lot of other people who signed up, and for various reasons they couldn't make it or they couldn't join. They will be getting a recording, but I think we need to reward live attendance, and we'll talk more about that. Ask questions. More importantly, ask questions and acknowledge the answers. Scripted spontaneity. I'm a big fan of improv comedy, which has so many rules, but to an audience comes across as so improvised, so in the moment. Which it's all about the spontaneity, but there is a certain script behind it, and we'll talk about how you can have a bit of that. And not being presumptuous, desiring that your run of show can always use more work. I mean, there is always room for improvement. Maybe these background colors need to look better. Maybe things need to change. The order needs to change. And I'm going to learn from this one, talk to my colleagues, figure out what was good, what was not good, and do more of what was good and do less of what was not good for the next time that we run this webinar. I'm going to dive into each of these points one after the other. And like we've seen so far, we promised to keep it interactive and fun. So let's jump right in. Right? Let's go into the first secret. Right? And just to remind you, that was don't assume things about your audience. And that's exactly what, if you see, I did in the beginning. This is a screenshot of my run-off show. We'll visit it again a little later, which is really the sequence I'm taking you through in StreamAlive. If you look at it, this is my run-off show over here, one after the other. These are the slides we just, slides and interactions we just completed, and these are the ones that we are in right now at this point in time, right? So I asked you where you're joining from. So I got a sense of, whether you're joining us in the daytime, early in the morning, close to afternoon. Is it close to lunch for you? If you're on the East Coast, yes, it is. Is it late in the evening for you? Some of the folks are joining us from India, and that gave me a sense of where people are joining from and what time of the day it is for them. I asked you what you do. We had people saying operations. We had people saying marketing. We had people talking about sales, someone else talking about teaching and so on and so forth. And we had questions around why you joined us today, which was that whole talking tiles visualization. And some of you wanted to see a bit of how StreamAlive is used in a session. Some of you wanted to understand how to make sessions more interesting and engaging. And hopefully we'll address all of those things. So I spent a good, I'm just looking at the time here, a good 15 minutes almost out of the 20 minutes that we spent so far in understanding who you are. And that allows me to hopefully deliver a much better experience than I would if I had made assumptions. So that's really the first secret. Don't assume things about your audience. I told you about the 56 live sessions I attended during the course of writing the book. And I remember in one of them, the presenter was talking a lot about optimizing book descriptions and, the hook that you need. And there's a lot of marketing stuff about you better do this or your book is doomed and stuff. And then there was this lady, she would have been, in her 60s, I gather, and she raised her hand and asked a question. And this was about half an hour into the session after we covered about 6 different killer marketing tactics. And her question was very, very simple. She said, I'm writing a book because I want my grandchildren and later my great-grandchildren and the others that come in generations after I pass to know something about my life. And that's the reason I'm writing this book. So I don't really care about any of these things. What should I do? Right? And the whole slant of the conversation changed altogether. And I think at that point, I was left thinking, I mean, I knew from internal conversations, and I'd gotten to bond with some of the folks over there. I knew that some of the others had also come in for that same purpose. And, I kind of figured that if we'd spent time in understanding what people had joined for, it would have been a much more engaging session. Right? I'm just going to jump out for a second, look at questions. As just okay, we'll address all questions now at the end. I just want to go over some of these things, how to engage the audience. Hopefully you're seeing some of those. Tina, I'll let Heather answer that to you. Heather, feel free to directly message Tina about the webinar. And again, if time permits, tell us all about it later today. Users only chat, we covered that. Can all StreamAlive logos be replaced by our own? Yes, absolutely. It's a function of the plan that you sign up for, but yes, and happy to have a conversation on that. This was not a sales pitch on StreamAlive, but of course, we're happy to show you how to do that and everything. So Tim, feel free to ping us later and we can show you that. But yes, you can replace the logos. And this one is, no, not really. I mean, I'm actually running just one computer and I'm running StreamAlive over here. And I've imported my slides into StreamAlive. So I'm running my slides and my interactions entirely through StreamAlive. And that's the objective. It's built for a single computer, single person usage. Yep. Okay, so that's really secret one to great engagement. Don't assume things about your audience. What's the best way to do that? Ask them. It's as simple as that, right? For the second one, I have a question, right? And it's not necessarily about this webinar because you obviously joined this one today. But when you typically sign up for a webinar, I'd love to know what you usually do. And if you just type 1 or 2 or 3 in the chat. If you usually sign up for a webinar and more often than not attend it live like you're doing today, just type 1 in the chat. If you skip it and watch the recording, please type 2. And if what you usually do is get the recording and end up never watching it, please go ahead and do that. Okay, right now we got more of skip it and watch the recording. That's number 2. Okay, I refuse to believe there's nobody who gets a recording and never watches it. If that's something you do often, please type 3. But right now it looks like most people skip it and watch the recording. Just going to keep that going for another, let's actually just run a timer movie, maybe over here. 5 minutes is too much. Whoops. Okay, sorry, I clicked on the wrong button over there, but we've got most people saying they skip it and watch the recording, which I did not type my answer in there, but if I had to, I would have said exactly the same thing. In fact, this is what I do with most webinars that I sign up for. I wait for the recording, watch it at double the speed, and watch it on a treadmill. So that way I get my reps in, my steps in, and I also get to watch it at maybe 2/3 the time or something like that. And the reason is very simple. There's no difference between the recorded experience and the live experience. So I think it behooves us to deliver an experience that rewards live attendance, that factors the people who are in the room. So if we had a different set of people in the room, we would have got a different set of answers for, I think it's about 5 questions we've asked so far: the poll, the map, what you do. And I think we need to make the people a part of the conversation, because that's really what it's all about. And if you're not doing that, there's no difference between the live experience and the recorded experience. And that's a fundamental tentpole of what we believe, that we need to reward people for attending a session live and not waiting for the recording. Right? In fact, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of events at StreamAlive, and some of them will not even have a recording. So it happens, and if you don't attend it, we're actually having one on the 16th of August, where we have a guest speaker who has explicitly stated that he wishes not to give a recording out because he's going to be sharing a lot of things that he usually charges for. It's on writing for the internet. And in that case, there's not going to be a recording, and the live experience is all there is. Secret 3 to great engagement is really, I'm going to revisit that screenshot I showed you a little while back, because if you look at it, it's all about questions. And I asked you a lot of questions. And if you see the graph below that, which shows an increasing gradation, it's there for a reason. Let's just look at the questions we started off this session with. The first one was, where are you joining from? Put it in the chat. And that, if you ask me, is almost like a no-brainer, because everybody knows where they're joining from. There's no cognitive load in trying to answer that question. You just type in a city, a country, a state, and you're done. The second one, in 1 or 2 words, how do you describe what you do? For some of us, it's very obvious. It's typically our job description. I run a separate workshop on how to give better answers to, so what do you do when you're asked that question? And I think there's a lot more color to us, but most of us, more often than not, would answer that with what we do for a living and what we do in our jobs. And sometimes you want to think about it, like do I type technology entrepreneur, or do I type speaker or something like that? Sometimes there's multiple facets and you're a little undecided. It takes a couple more seconds, but it's still easy. Why did you join us today? And some of you probably noticed, I had to wait a couple of seconds before I got answers to that particular question, because that's something where you reflect, okay, why did I join this? Why did I sacrifice an hour of my life to come and join the session today? And you want to think a little bit about it, because maybe there's a more nuanced answer, maybe there's an obvious one, maybe you need to think about it. But the cognitive load of these 3 questions is in increasing order. And that's not an accident, that's by design, because you want to make it easy for people initially, to just get people warmed up and comfortable with putting things in the chat and participating, and then go on to things that might require a little more thought, a little more effort, a little more cognitive load. And that's exactly what we've done in today's session. We've asked a lot of questions, and there has been a gradation to them and a pattern to how we've asked those questions. It's not enough to ask questions. I think we need to acknowledge answers, which really is my personal biggest pet peeve with a lot of live sessions, where the presenter often kicks it off with, hey, where's everybody joining us from? And 200 people, and put it in the chat, and then the person eyeballs 2 people and says, oh, we've got Shweta from Florida, we've got Tim, if I recall right, from Phoenix. and then ignores the remaining 198 people in the room. And you can't blame the presenter, because it'll be pretty weird if they called out 198 other locations. They'd sound like a geography teacher. But I think it's important to acknowledge people, because there's something powerful that happens when you do those three icons that you see over there. When you tell people, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, right? None of us likes to be invisible. And unfortunately, that's what we do in a lot of live sessions, where people are encouraged to participate, and then their answers are totally ignored, because it's technologically or humanly not possible to acknowledge each and every one. And I think where technology allows, like with things like StreamAlive, one should absolutely do that, because it's not enough to ask questions. It's important to acknowledge the answers. Number 5. By the way, I should have mentioned something. Tina, you asked Heather about what the webinar is about. Folks, if you have any links to your work, your LinkedIn profile, perhaps anything that you want to and are comfortable sharing publicly, just put that in the chat as well. Because, besides me being the metaphorical presenter over here on the top of the triangle, talking to a nun and someone in a bowler hat who I don't think is there in today's room, we want to encourage people to talk to each other as well. So if you've got links to your work or your next class or your next course, or to the webinar, Heather, if it's something you want to share, or anything else, just put it in the chat. It can be a LinkedIn profile, your Twitter handle, can be a website, anything. We have a feature, and I'll come to it later, that automatically curates links off the chat, creates a document from it, and in the post-show follow-up email, we will be sharing that, which will share all the links that anyone has shared with the rest of us. Yeah. So feel free to put any links you want to share with this tribe of people who are interested in making webinars less boring and making online sessions a lot more engaging. And I'm sure you'll find a lot of kindred and like-minded souls. Right? So we're going to talk about Secret 5, which is really all about scripted spontaneity. Right? And it doesn't have to be absolutely spontaneous. You saw that I was jumping into Q&A, so I had it in my script that I'm going to go into Q&A once in a while, and we'll do that in a second over here as well. I talked to you about links and stuff, which I should ideally have done a little earlier, but it's all about having a workflow that is kind of not fully scripted, but you have a structure to it. Right? So, for example, we talked about Q&A links and people. For example, I could come back to the Q&A over here, and I think I addressed all the questions. So we don't have any new questions over here. I'm going to come back here and revisit it if you have any other questions towards the end. Just going to go back here. I talked to you about link library, which is really what, okay, so you got a few links over here. Thanks, Tim, for sharing that. We got Heather's YouTube link. We've got Heather's website as well. Folks, again, if you have anything you want, it can be a website, it can be a YouTube link, it can be any of these things too. It can be a book you recommend, your Facebook page, if you're a live streamer, your Twitch handle if you'd like, Twitter handles, LinkedIn profiles, everything's welcome. We'll share this with everybody. So anything you share here will be shared as a document. And by the way, I'm just going to copy that link and put it in the chat right away for you folks, so you get a sense of what that looks like. It's there in the chat for you to look at later. We'll also be sending it with the show notes at the end of the session. Right? So, oops, it's kind of pulled my own link over here. So how's that for a bit of inception? So I put a link on this links and it came back here. Okay, beautiful. All right. Can we get a copy of the document that gets sent to the host after a webinar that contains all the questions, answers, locations, poll info, etc.? Oh, absolutely, Tim. And we'll talk about that in exactly a second, because I think the last one actually talks about that. And I might go a little brave and try and, if you stick around till the end of the session, we'll actually show you the analytics for this session, which kind of shows you what exactly you get at the exhaust in terms of, you get an entire mother of all Excel files that includes all of these interactions. All of the founders here, the company, have previously founded an analytics company. So analytics kind of runs in our DNA. So there's a lot of charts and graphs and summaries that come out at the end of it. Absolutely. I'm going to do something fun over here as well. So everyone who participated, I'm just going to, I'd love to mail a copy of this book for being with us thus far. We just got a few more minutes. We're going to cover a few more things, but I wanted to show you this one once again. So I'm just going to run the winning wheel, and whoever it ends at, okay, Varsha, thank you for joining us. And if you want to just direct message me with where I can send this copy of this book, we'll be sure to do that after this session. So just let us know. Yeah. Sure. Moving on, and I think this will kind of address your question as well, Tim. We need to be in a mode of constant dissatisfaction, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think one of the big secrets to great engagement is deciding that you can always improve what you have as a run-off show. So what you're seeing in the first instance is really a screenshot of some of the analytics that you get at the end of it. The spikes typically happen when you have those bands, and the bands are where you have the questions. And again, for those who stick around at the end of the session, when you disconnect, I'm happy to show you what it looks like on the StreamAlive app and you look at analytics. I can't do it right now because it happens after the session and we're obviously still in the session. So this is post facto, but you will get a pretty good sense of what worked, what didn't. Look at where you had the spikes, where you had the troughs, and do more spikes, do less troughs, right? You also get a real-time indicator of engagement. I don't know if you folks noticed it as we were reading the questions, but I'm going to encourage you to notice it in the next interaction that we do. But broadly, the idea is use data for starters to help inform how you can have a much better and more engaging session the next time around, right? So I just want to look at the engagement meter, as we call it. It's over here. So when I move my cursor to the middle, everything else disappears to give me the full screen and make it look clean and nice. I'm going to force my cursor down here so that you can see all the things on the side and the bottom. I'd love to know what you liked, didn't like about today's session, right? So any feedback on how we should make this better, improve things, should we do more of something, less of something? So any feedback you folks have, if you can just put it in the chat now, that would be super awesome. This again is a question that goes higher up in the gradation scale of cognitive efforts. It's not as simple as answering where you're joining us from. You might throw that little line between being delicate and being honest and being helpful. Okay. Tim, I'm going to ask you what you didn't like. And folks, please join Tim in terms of answering that. Otherwise, you're going to see Tim's answer over here for a very, very long time. This is a feature called transient thoughts that that's exactly the objective, Shweta, to make it conversational, right? Yep. We don't want to make it here is a demo of our product. We wanted to make it an engaging conversation, and conversation is really the gist of it. Right? You got to explain that one, Heather. So once we've done with answers, you got to tell us what you mean by balcony versus dance floor. I think I have an intuitive sense, but I'd love to know what do you mean by that. Yeah. So just wait for. Okay, we got more dance floor and balcony. Okay. A good mix between show and tell. And Tim, I'd love for you to elaborate on that as well, because it's, like I said, it's great. So two ways to figure out what works and what doesn't. One of them is to do exactly what I'm doing over here, where, I've been asking you for qualitative feedback that helps me. And these are all things I will have in my StreamAlive dashboard to refer back to and say, okay, do more of the things that you folks recommended and less of the folks, the things that you said you should not do. And we look at the data as well to help inform a decision on what worked and what didn't. But Heather, Tim, in that order, if you don't mind just unmuting yourself and adding a little more color to the feedback you gave, Heather, in terms of it teaches about the balcony and the dance floor for starters.
Yeah, sure. So the dance floor is the place where we as participants are this is where we are, right? So we're receiving the information, we might be interacting with what you're doing at StreamAlive. And then the balcony is sort of like, okay, now I'm going to think about how I'm going to use these tools in my practice as a facilitator, presenter, that type of thing. So I like that you shared that with us. Like, here's the tool, experience it, and here's how you might use it. And so that was great. And I'd love for that to be blurred a little bit. So while I loved getting to know you and your story about doing some stand-up comedy, I kind of wish you would have done a little stand-up comedy without having to tell us. I would have loved to have had that blurred a little bit. Yeah, that's all. Thank
Got
you.
it. If you come back for this webinar in 2 months from now and you find a few more jokes and you see references and pictures of balconies and dance floors, you know where that came from.
All right. That's what we want to see.
Tim, if you're comfortable, would love for you to unmute and tell us a little more about your feedback.
Yeah, I just signed up for StreamAlive several months ago, and I always found it difficult to understand, okay, exactly what does it do and how does it work? And so I finally, I don't know what took me so long, I finally decided to sign up for a couple of webinars because I was trying to do it myself, without any people and just kind of testing things. And it was just very kind of confusing, but when I can watch a webinar with all the different features, and then it's like I've got all these questions I've been burning through my head for months, and they get answered as well. So it's kind of fun.
That's great to hear, Tim, and thank you. I mean, that's reassuring because that was the reason we kicked off this webinar series, saying it's not enough to give people a magic wand. You need to show a bit of magic while using the wand so they can go and use it in the way that you kind of demonstrate. And that's exactly the objective. Question for you. We've been debating whether we should also run parallel sessions that are just pure product demos to show the features one after the other, show this is how you do it. Would you recommend we do that as well in addition to these?
Really like the mix. I think the mix is great because like you could see a real webinar going on and sort of envision what you can do yourself. But at the same time, you always stop every few minutes and say, well, here's some questions, and you answer them quickly and it's easy. Hopefully with all my questions, it hasn't bored everybody else. Maybe we should ask them. But for me personally, I think this is a great way to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. I'm just going to recap over here, folks. So once again, these are the 6 things. Don't assume things about your audience. Ask them, deliver an experience that rewards live attendance. I think some of the to and fro and conversations we've had so far will not and cannot happen with a recorded session. Ask questions, acknowledge answers. Spontaneity can be scripted. And like I told you, my runner show is going to feature a lot more comedy, balconies, dance floors, and a lot more of the to and fro that we talked about going forward. And I'm sure the next time we do, we'll get even more feedback. We keep iterating and improving it. Right? If I were to kind of paraphrase all of that, it's essentially boils down to presenters moving from being presenters to becoming listeners. The word presenter has a very implicit thing within it. It's like you will present and the others will listen. And I think that's where the fundamental mistake starts. It needs to be not just presenters. It needs to be like a conversation where there isn't a hierarchy. The presentation needs to be less presentation and more interaction. It needs to be a two-way conversation. And if you do that, the presenter becomes a listener, the presentations become interactions, and the audiences become participants, like all of you have so nicely been so far today. I mean, engagement kind of sorts itself out. Poor engagement becomes high engagement, and then it's really that simple. And if I were to condense all of that into just one single sentence, it's just this. We use the word attendees, signups. You kind of disembodify it. We kind of make it statistics and numbers, which I realize is important. I mean, I'm a marketer too. You need your marketing qualified leads and your sales qualified leads and everything. But in the session, if we have conversations to the extent possible, where we treat people not as attendees, but as people, I think that's really all we need to do to make webinars a lot less boring and a lot more engaging. Because when you treat people as people, then you can focus on what they feel in the session, because this is one of my favorite quotes. At the end of the day, when you attend sessions or you go for something, people don't remember what you said or did. They remember how you made them feel. And I hope you feel good about attending today's session. You feel good about leading your own sessions. Thank you for joining us today. We've intentionally, finished this a little ahead of time. I always find it nice to give people a slice of their life back from what they budgeted. And we also have a little more time for questions and to go totally off script. Like we said, we're fans of improv. So we're actually going to jump in, disconnect from here and go into the analytics thing. Tim, if you'd like to hang around, we'll show you what that looks like for this session, and anyone else who would like to see it, of course. If you haven't already, please sign up for a free account at StreamAlive if you'd like to. We do a lot of events and sessions like this. We just kicked it off every week. We'll do something interesting where we'll hopefully teach you something new about whether it's writing or whether it's better conversations or something else, or building a personal brand. We got an expert on personal branding coming in sometime in September. And the best way to stay in touch with all that is to go to our link tree and look at StreamAlive. It has a link to everything, including our website and videos and everything. And to follow some of my stuff personally till I start actually putting some of the comedy into these sessions. My work is on Linktree/Lux Narayan. So again, thank you very much everyone for joining us. Hang around if you'd like to be a part of the conversation. We're just going to riff. I'm happy to demo anything that people would like to see on StreamAlive per se. But this is the end of the webinar. You'll be getting a recording, not the same as attending it live. You'll also be getting, if you still want to share your links, there is still time. Okay, Tina, thank you for sharing your LinkedIn. Anyone else wants to share their LinkedIn and get some awesome people connecting with them? You know where to put it, just put it on the chat. Fun thing, by the way, this is everything you typed in the chat so far. It's a feature called Text Track, which just kind of captures what's happening in the chat in real time. And there's a whole bunch of features we didn't go through today, including, the choice circle and the emojis everywhere. Maybe we'll do it in future live streams, or maybe you'll play around with it and discover it for yourself. Gonna just go ahead. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to drop off if you don't want to see the rest of them. We're going to jump into analytics right now, and I'm happy to take on any other questions. Just looking at the questions here again. Right, this one had a question mark. That's right. Came in. Can we get a copy of the document? We talked about this. Yes, this is the one we're going to address right away, Tim. And okay, this was captured as a question, although it's strictly speaking not that. So at the end of the session, I'm just going to go down to the end of over here, click on disconnect, confirm that I want to disconnect. So this disconnects the StreamAlive bot, which you might have noticed was one of the participants from the session. And this is really what I was running earlier today. I'd attached this and put this run of show over here. Tim, in response to your question, I'm going to jump into my analytics and click on the analyze button for today's session. And here's a summary. After I show you this, I'd love for you to comment on it and say if there's something missing that you were hoping to see, or what do you think of it. But I'll just go over it very, very quickly. It gives me a quick summary, 71 comments by 9 people. Average is 1 per minute, highest was 8. I ran 7 interactions and got 32 responses. Tina, Tim, Heather, Joe in order of participation. This is kind of what we ran at different points in time. I could click on any of these and look at it. So when I ask people, hey, why did you join the session today? And these are the answers we got for that one. And not surprisingly, you'll see a spike in chat when you ask people a question, and more importantly, visualize and acknowledge their answers by visualizing it. Tim, this is the response to your question on can we see the results? Yes, you absolutely can. A lot of people take this and put it on their socials. In fact, we'll soon have a share on LinkedIn kind of button over here. But you could, you could say, oh, we had a lot of participants from the US. It's an interactive thing over here. So you could do anything here and you could just take a screenshot, which includes responses to everything, including the fact that Heather won the first winning wheel.
Can you export those?
Oh, absolutely. So you could take a screenshot from here, or if you click on the email reports button, it's going to send you an email, a mother of all Excel files that has a bunch of tabs, and one of those tabs has all of these exported as images.
Wow. Okay, cool.
All the questions you answered, didn't answer, ignored, could address, all the links that people share. And again, if I forgot to share it during the session, I can click on the share here and send it across, which I will do afterwards. Everything that people typed except the 1s, 2s, and 3s, which they put for the polls, because that kind of, crowds it up a little bit. And again, it automatically gets emailed, or you can click a button and get an email report on the entire thing. And I think Tim, you or somebody else who had a question also about branding. So one of the perks of my job is I get a premium account where I can change the logo as required. Of course, I don't want to change it from StreamAlive, so it stays, but you could change the logo and the colors, including what the water looks like, the land looks like, the poles, the background, the bubbles, and every single thing. If it's colored, it can be changed, and that allows you to customize it to reflect your brand and feel. We also allow you to customize fonts to a certain extent on some of the textual things. So there's a lot of things you can. Again, I don't want to make this a full StreamAlive demo, so I didn't get into these details. But as you can see, there's a fair amount of customization under the hood. There's also a lot of. So I'm a part of other teams. I have people who are part of my team, so you can add people as moderators, where they can look at the Q&A and sanitize it before you get to it. They can remove any untoward word on the word clouds. So you can make this a team effort if you have more than one person helping you out with things. Lots of stuff. And again, Tim, encourage you to play around with it. And if you run into an issue, happy to have someone on our team jump in and show you around as well. But hopefully this session helps.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks very much. Can I ask one more question?
Please do.
So, so when I been playing around with StreamAlive, I mean, the most success I had was when I went onto a completely different computer and controlled everything from there. But you said you can do it from one. Is it just as easy, or?
It is. So just to show you what I did over here was, I did this, in fact, I made some changes to our webinar thing, and I had the final version less than half an hour before our thing today. In fact, about 15 minutes before. So what I did just before our session today was I basically added all my slides in here, where I added a PDF, and this is something I created in Keynote. And I just exported my entire slide deck with placeholders for where I wanted the interactions. So I said, okay, I want a map here. I want to do word cloud here. I want to ask people why they joined the session here. So I had these placeholders and these slides. I imported everything. And then I simply went to, we will soon have a slide sort of view. So one admittedly painful thing right now is you got to look at the view here to figure out which one it is. So I had a placeholder slide here saying, ask people where they're joining from. I just took that out and replaced it with this interaction, right? Which is as simple as saying, add interaction, add a map, ask people, and it prompts you for, where are you joining from, for example, and then save. And that became part of my run or show. So I just took my entire slide deck and replaced the placeholder slides, just deleted them. So you'll see there's a slide 8, 9, 10, and the 11, which is a placeholder slide for that poll, which I ran, which is, after a webinar, you usually attend it, skip it, and everything. Just replace slide 11, which was my placeholder. So I took my slide deck in, peppered in about 7 interactions, and after that, I'm just going to go back here. I don't want to save what I did. And then all I did was say that I have an upcoming session. You can see I tested it just around almost exactly the same time. I tested it finally about 5 minutes before our session, just to make sure everything was running fine. And then when I actually ran it, all I did was tell StreamAlive where the session was happening, which is the same URL you click to join us today, and that I want to run a show that you just saw. And then when I clicked on connect, and it's going to do that probably again now, StreamAlive, I have a waiting room enabled, so I had to let the bot in. The bot joins the meeting. It's left it at the last slide that I wasn't because I was there earlier, but I could go back to my first slide if I wanted. Right, scroll up here, for example. This is kind of where we started. And I was operating the entire thing with my keyboard. So we have keyboard shortcuts. So I'm just going to refresh this one. Let's restart it again. We have keyboard shortcuts where I'm going to use my left and right keys to navigate between them, and spacebar to start an interaction. So as people type their answers, thank you, Joe, it populates the map over here. And once I'm done with this, I'm just pressing my right arrow key at this point. Thank you, Tina. It went to the next slide, which you saw. And I press the right arrow key again. Next slide, right arrow key. you can see the hotkeys, left and right to navigate, spacebar to restart. I'm going to restart this interaction. And that's all there is to it.
For some reason, I was having a hard time getting control of it and making it present from, and keeping it separate from my own camera and voice.
Happy to jump on. If you just email us at hi@streamalive.com, Tim, me or somebody else, one of my colleagues are happy to jump in and see if we can help.
Okay, yeah, and I'll practice it again by myself because I think it's obviously me. So
we love meeting our users. So if we get half an excuse to have a conversation with someone who's using it, it's always been a learning moment for us. So just let us know.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Tina just said share screen.
Oh, okay. As in, I think what Tina's referring to, and Tina, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is that, once you have it on your screen, on your StreamAlive screen, I think she's asking if you are sharing your screen. Is that your point, Tina? What do you?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like with StreamAlive, you have to share the browser where StreamAlive is running. StreamAlive itself doesn't work on Zoom directly as of now.
That's how you make it come up and actually present, is you go into StreamAlive and you say, present your screen.
As in, you go to Zoom and you say share screen and you choose the browser tab or screen that StreamAlive is running in. So everyone is looking at your browser basically.
Ah, okay. Okay, I think I can do that. Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Lux. I think I can do that.
Glad we clarified that. Yeah, so give it a shot, Tim, and if there's anything else we can help you with, yes, please let us know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, folks. Have a lovely rest of your day, and please do join us for some of the future webinars that we have as well. We promise they'll all be as engaging, and hopefully you learn something new in each and every one of them. We certainly do. Thank you.
Thanks again.